Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Untitled Reviews, this being a show where it's about dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Kevin Kneff himself. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. First and foremost, the whole Diane and Neil thing was kind of interesting. At first, like, them spending time in a hotel and stuff like that, and he's like, oh, your room is nice and stuff. He's like, so you ever want to just, you busy on Friday? She's like, I'm working. He's like, well, he's like, oh, you want to hang out afterwards or whatever? And she's like, yeah, us is just kind of a here thing. But even though she said that, I was kind of like, I kind of felt bad for Neil, because it's like, oh, you wanted this to kind of be something more. He's like, yeah, sure, I get it. But then there was that look on her face, almost like she was kind of sad by the notion of, oh, you got to go? Yeah, I guess I got to go too. It's that little break away from reality that they kind of got to enjoy. Once again, it's, and Diane even talks about it later, that they ended up making each other better. Like, she didn't want to drink, and because she wasn't drinking, like, he was kind of on a better mend as well. Like, they helped kind of alleviate some of the realities of everything that was going on. So, and I think maybe that's why it's like, yeah, it's a little pocket fantasy where they get to just be free, and in that moment just kind of like, oh, I guess this dream of ours is kind of over for right now. So, but then later on, they're hanging out at the bar, making out and stuff, which where Allison saw them. So I guess for her, she was like, you know what, I do want more. And I don't know whether Allison was trying to warn Diane away from Neil because of Neil's tendencies. Like, right, he can be, I mean, not the greatest person. He did choke her and everything, extenuating them circumstances, but still, like, that's in him somewhere, and she didn't want Diane to get hurt. But the sad thing is, Neil kind of fell into bad habits. And I think it's just, right, when Kevin came calling, it's just kind of like, yeah, sure, buddy. It's like, Kevin has such a strong hold on him despite everything. It's like, right, he blamed you last episode, tried to put everything on you, including the blackout that he caused. But I think it's a situation where he wants to go back and hang out with Kevin because Kevin's my best friend. But Diane was like, you hate him. It's like, no, I don't. And she's like, yeah, it's because of stupid stuff like having sex with you. She's like, oh, so having sex with me is stupid. He was like, yeah, kinda. It's just because he was kind of lashing out because I think he's got a swell of so many emotions. Like, so much is there. Like, the whole Allison and Patty thing has really, obviously got him really fucked up. And I think he wants some form of normalcy, and that's hanging around Kevin, but it's not making things better. In fact, it's making it worse, because I think he's also kind of opened his eyes to realize how much of a piece of shit Kevin is. And now that, in conjunction with everything he's dealing with, it's like there's no, now that Pandora's box has been opened, you can't close it. Now, nothing will ever be the same. So I think there's just a culmination of all of that's really messing with him. And, he went out drinking with Kevin, and it's like, right now, he's like so focused on the fact, it's like, oh man, Kevin's pissed at me now, and it's just like, he's trying to hold on to this friendship, which he shouldn't, because Kevin's not a good friend, he's just not a good dude in general, but I think that's what it all, like, comes down to, and later on, he ends up in, jail because of all this whatever shenanigans him and Kevin got mixed up in. And we see Kevin, he's just perfectly fine, and that's the problem. No matter what, everyone else around Kevin suffers. While, and I'm also surprised his dad's so willing to forgive him. It's like, oh yeah, you blame me for stealing your generator. I'm one of the suspects for stealing your generator. You stole my girlfriend's hearing aid, and now, like, oh, it's just like, but I guess it's like, right, you're his son. He's your son, so, like, obviously you're going to be a little more forgiving to him than anyone else. But, I don't know, like, Lorraine was almost kind of like oh yeah, hey, like, she probably isn't so forgiving about the fact is, hey, you stole my earring, super dick move on your part. I also think it's interesting too, and maybe that's just me, but I guess she has nothing to laugh about, but it's like, we didn't hear that laugh of hers this episode, and I think maybe that's indicative of something, maybe not. But either way, Neil got arrested, but it wasn't Patty who paid his bill. It was actually Diane, who's actually going to AA now, because she even said, like, right, you shouldn't be trying to start something new, like when you're trying to get sober, but being around Neil made her sober. And it's like, now she's like, obviously it was kind of nice, but now that things are kind of got to where they are with Neil, she's worried. She's like, I can't help, I'm worried for him. I can't help but worry about him, because she does care about him and knows, like, there's something there that you're dealing with. And so the fact is that she ended up being the one to bail him out. I wonder, was he actually expecting it to be Patty, and when it was Diane, it kind of caught him by surprise. But Diane's actually got money, and she ended up giving it to Allison. She's like, for your vacation. And you're like, so is she talking about kind of like her quote unquote like vacation away from Chuck? Is that what she's kind of implying? Or like, because I'm like, she doesn't know what Allison is doing. No one's told her, but like, it seems like maybe on some level she knows, like, right, you're trying to get away from Kevin. You set up that whole thing for, you know, it was about me and Chuck, but she's like, no, I know in actuality it was really about you and Kevin. And especially now that I see, once again, she was last season on, I'm like, oh, like, lucky to have Kevin. And once again, once your eyes are open, you're like, man, Kevin's a dick. And, you know, and having gone through everything she's going through with Chuck, I think it has changed her perspective on. I think it's just that thing of you just kind of like living life and you just kind of let life sway you along, and you just kind of realize at some point, like, wow, I've just let life kind of take me on its trajectory, and I haven't made decisions necessarily 100% on my own. So maybe that's what really. I mean, maybe a lot of that, like, once again, it's just like her eyes are open in more ways than one, and that's what's really pushed her to try and, like, now she's able to kind of see things from Allison's perspective, because it's like, right, we're in very similar shoes. And she even said, like, yeah, I never wanted any kids, you know, because that would mean, like, right, I'd have to take care of them till the day I died or something. But she's like, yeah, you know, and I always thought I'd end up with a boy, but I always kind of wanted a girl. So it's like she looks at Allison as more like the daughter she never had. So I thought that was sweet. So she wants to do everything she can to help her. Which, speaking of Allison, obviously she was with Sam, and Sam's like, cool, so have you figured out, like, because he felt like she was slow rolling it, and the same thing for Patty too. I thought that was kind of an interesting thing, that both of them were slow rolling their respective situations. Allison's kind of slow rolling this whole faking your death situation, and Patty's slow rolling the whole moving in with Tammy thing. And then they get in a car accident, but Allison immediately shows up at Patty's and being like, no, I can't go to the hospital, because if I go to the hospital, there's going to be a whole bunch of questions from Jen and Kevin about, why were you two together? What was that about? You know, so it's like, because it was probably like the middle of the day too, so it was like, what was that about? But luckily, Patty popped her arm back into place. And I love this, like, right, how do we do this? You kind of look it up on YouTube. I was like, okay, I guess she must have did a pretty good job. I mean, it's like, I feel like, you could probably end up easily doing that wrong and probably making things much worse, but it seemed like it all worked out. Allison also had this line or whatever where she was like, I'm not going to get in tub with my full-grown son or something. And then Allison had this wild line. She was like, oh, it must remind you of your priest nervousness or something like that. And he's just like, no one asked you or something. I was like, I don't know if I'm reading too much into that line of like, oh, your priest nervousness or something must remind you of that. I don't know. I just thought that was such once again, it's like, you know, Allison making digs, and like everyone else kind of takes it in stride, but I'm like, yo, no one else, like, I mean, the rest of the, like, you know, whether it be, because Neil, like, some of Allison's jabs kind of went over his head about, like, what was it? They made comparisons to Neil and someone else, and she's like, yeah, you have the same IQ, and he's like, thank you. So it's like, I mean, to be fair, he was kind of drunk at the time, so, and I think the whole, like, trying to keep pleasantries in front of Kevin between him and Allison kind of played into that, but either way. I love that, Kevin, just kind of not Kevin McRoberts, Kelvin McRoberts, you know, can be a destructive tool used for good, is what this episode ended up teaching us. I mean, first and foremost, he kind of blew up Sam's life because he went talking to Jen about how, oh, Allison's working all the time, because Allison working at the diner with Sam is pulling her away from her real job, the work that she really enjoys, cleaning up at home. It's like, oh, she's going on strike and stuff, so. Because for her, it's like, I've never had fun, you know, I never, like, gambled, I'd never been in a fight, which Patty was like, hey, I got stuff over there, and I can punch real good, but it's like, yeah, I've never really lived my life. She's like, despite everything about Kevin, God, he's awful in every way, but the man knows how to have fun, and he never lets life stop him from having fun. So there's an aspect of Allison that was kind of envious of that to some extent, so. And now it's like, yeah, Kevin doing his normal thing, kind of blowing up everyone's life. So Jen ends up confronting Sam about things. So Sam was clean about everything. He could have just been like, oh, I'm not happy in his marriage. But I guess he ended up telling, well, not I guess. He said he told her about Allison and everything, too. Which even Sam's like, yeah, honestly, I kind of feel indebted to Kevin. It's like, really? It's like, yeah, just wasn't his intention. But honestly, me and Jen weren't in a good place. Even before we came back here. It's like, the fact is that we were just pretending, and if Kevin hadn't blown up our lives, we would have just kept on pretending. And it's like, yeah, that's no reason to stay in a relationship. I mean, look at Allison and Kevin. I mean, look at their circumstances. So it's like, yeah, I'm kind of a little grateful for him kind of blowing up my life. I mean, it kind of sucks, but I mean, it was probably the right move in the long run. Kind of forced me to do something, forced my hand in the circumstances. Problem is that his in-laws found out about it and they're trying to take his diamond from him. It's like, they don't want it. They're just doing it just to spite him, you know? So Allison decides, you know what? Why don't we use our greatest weapon, Kevin? So they ultimately end up doing that. And Kevin, he made this whole thing about like, oh yeah, I slipped and fell. I'm gonna sue the restaurant. And they were like, yo, we don't want to be a part of any lawsuits. So they like remove themselves from the situation. It's like, well, once again, Kevin's douchebaggery, his frat boy status, him just being him, Kevin just being Kevin, can be used for good. And I love that that's Allison's takeaway from this episode, being like, hey, because she finally admits that she's been slow rolling things, especially like her and Patty hanging out this episode, and she was like, Patty was like, yeah, Tammy thinks you're a bad influence. She said, really? And then there's instances of her looking back on this episode, and I don't know if that's just like, oh, these are instances of me dragging Patty into all of this, so maybe that's her extra reason for wanting to stay. It's more so like, no, I like my life here, in particular, me and Patty. It's like, we're friends, and I want to take care of her, because it's my fault she got dragged into all of this. Every step of the way has been my fault, and Patty was only doing stuff for me, and because of that, she's in trouble, and obviously, I was surprised when Tammy showed her the footage. I was like, oh, snap. So I thought she wasn't making it official yet because she wanted to probably try, and I still think she's trying to get, like, close enough to Patty to figure out, like, what's going on. But the fact is, I was surprised she showed it to Alice, and Alice, she's like, you haven't noticed her being different, have you? It's like, oh, she's been a little off. It's like, no, she's been pretty normal with me. And I'm like, probably shouldn't have used those exact words. Probably should have said literally anything else but that, because you can tell that, in particular, annoyed Tammy. Because Tammy already doesn't like the amount of time that like, Allison and Patty spend together. So her saying that, like, oh, she's normal around me, making it almost sound like, unintentionally, Allison was obviously trying to deflect, but she almost makes it sound like, oh, so you're saying it's my fault that Patty might be acting a little weird. It's like, oh, she's normal around you. Like, Allison was just saying that, but Tammy's going to look at that a little differently. Like, oh, yeah, sure. Okay, bye, Allison. Like, you can tell it's super pissed her off because she's already had her issues. Like, she is jealous about the amount of time that Allison and Patty spend together. She made that pretty clear. It's like, yeah, I'm her girlfriend. We should be together all the time, but you take a step back. Which is so interesting. I mean, I think she has legitimately nothing intimate or anything like that happens, but it is still the thing of, I think Tammy notices how different Patty is potentially, like, because it's like, right, she's hiding something from me. Now that I know she was involved in this, like, there's a side of Patty I just don't know, apparently. I thought I kind of knew her, but apparently I don't. So, and now it's almost like oh, do you know what side of her I don't? Like, and probably also still thinking, you're probably the reason, like, I don't know how, but you're probably connected to this somehow because obviously you've always been a bad influence on her. I don't know. But it is all kind of falling on Patty, which Allison wants everything to fall on her when she fakes her death. I mean, hell, she was even going to, like, rip out her teeth and it's like, yeah, I'll be in a car fire with, and they'll find my teeth. And I'm like, even if you, I mean, it had to be extreme. And do correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe because obviously Patty was joking me like, okay, that's not how dental records work, and that's not how fire works. So I was about to say, I'm like, it wouldn't be enough to turn your body to ash. Like, I feel like a car kind of exploding, like, your skeletal remains will be there, because you obviously would, like, to turn bones into ash, you'd have to, like, get severe heat. I don't know if, like, a cremator's, like, I don't know if a fire's heat can necessarily, I mean, once again, I don't know anything. I've never like looked into it, but I guess because I've always watched stuff where it's like, oh yeah, this car is on fire, and I'm like, yeah, there's always like a skeleton. So I'm like, you'd still have to worry about that. But it's like, yeah, you don't really think this through, even though you're saying that you're thinking it through. Because she's like, yeah, this has got to be the last thing I do. And in that moment, Patty was almost like, yeah, last thing you do. It's like, neither one of them wants to admit, like, they want to stay for the other. It's like, right, Patty wants Allison to stay, and Allison wants her to stay. That's why she was almost like, right, I won't be around, you won't be my neighbor anymore. It's like, well, yeah, you won't be around either. So it's like, right, we kind of got to move forward. But obviously, the current circumstances have thrown some wrenches into all of that. So, but like I said, that line of Allison saying like she likes things as they are. It's like, oh, like he's like, oh, your life is so great here, and she's kind of like, yeah. It's like, it seems like Patty's like the main reason. Like, once again, that's why I'm like, I don't know if that's just a best friend thing or whether that's like, I still feel like the Allison and Patty thing could end up being more. Like, I don't know whether Allison's like, oh, I'm secretly in love with you, Patty, or just like, is it just like, oh, I don't want to leave you behind because of the shitstorm that's about to come into your life because of Tammy? And it's like, yeah, Tammy's kind of an issue and she can kind of ruin everything. So I'm going to throw my problem solver, Kevin, at that to kind of fix it. Because, I mean, things tend to work out for Kevin in the long run. So, but I'm just... My thing is, at the heart of it, what is her true motives for staying behind it? One, not wanting to leave this behind, because it's like, right, for 15 years, Kevin's taken everything from her, and now for the first time, like, she's able to take some of that back, and she enjoys, like, yeah, her life isn't the greatest, but now she enjoys where things are, especially because, right, when she was miserable in her life, she didn't have Patty in her corner, and it's like, well, whether there's going to be a her and Sam. Once again, I still don't even know if there's going to be like, if there's like a her and Patty. I've been saying that for a while now, but I still don't know if I'm reading too much into that. I bring it up every episode. I don't know if that's just me reading too much into that or not. But life is kind of more so going her way. And I think for the first time, in a weird way, she's kind of in that territory of potentially having fun. And now she doesn't want that all kind of taken away. She's going through all this trouble. And that might end up being a thing of she might want to stay. But when things kind of like play out, she might not have a choice. She might have to play the whole faking your death trump card and start over. I'm so curious to see how this is all going to play out. Where this is all going to go. Like, I would assume the whole Tammy thing is going to end with her getting fired. Like, Kevin somehow is going to get her fired, which is definitely going to be interesting. Obviously, Neil continues to be kind of an X factor in all of this. So is Nick, but he's in a coma. But there's always a possibility he's going to wake up, and that's going to be another wrench in all of this. I don't know. I'm really interested to see where all of this ultimately ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.